Hello, all you vital and relevant people. Welcome to Homemaking Radio. I hope you're doing well in your current circumstances and that you have great plans for its improvement. I tend to speak in Gaskellese and Austinese sometimes, and I may be quoting a few scriptures to you, but I hope that you're entertained by it and that can get you through some maybe repetitive or tedious jobs at home, as there are in many other places as well. I have recommended in the past that you go to the description box beneath the video, click that on, and go to the blog where I have posted this, embedded it, along with photographs from maybe what I'm wearing or things I have been doing that go with this post. And that way you won't have any advertisements to click off. I've also recommended that you get this video series. I know it's hard to get it under $20, but there are 3 DVDs in it, so it ends up being about $6 an episode. It's pretty good, and immerse yourself in it so you can get an understanding of what's going on, and then you can read the book. I always found that handy for me. But I'll explain what it's about pretty soon, and I would like to encourage you to get ready. And one of the things that I was thinking about today when you are getting dressed is how it at least helps you to focus. And even if life is swirling around you and you're not able to focus too much on what you should be doing and your list is not getting done, at least you'll be dressed. And there are many other reasons for it. It is a statement of how you feel about life. And I have been getting out some of my older things because I decided a long time ago the Queen is not coming. And there won't be any important, quote, important people outside of my own friends and family coming, so I'm going to wear it. And if it wears out, that's great. So ladies, I hope today you'll remember to put on a good appearance to get going this morning and not be tempted to, because sometimes it's tempting to just lay around in your sleeping clothes and think that you'll get things done and then you will get ready, but it can slow you down. So I'm hoping that you will take my admonition seriously to do your best. Today I'm going to have a cup of tea. This is the teacup I'm using, and it is perfectly mint. It's a blend of spearmint and other kinds of mint by Bigelow, and I'm doing it for the scent and the house. I don't always drink it, but I like to play with my teacups, and I like to try all the teas that I have. And sometimes people send me some in an envelope in the mail, and I like to try it, and I will take a sip of it. So I hope you have your tea ready and that you're ready to listen today while you get something done at home. I don't quite know where to start, but I thought maybe I would read you a few things, and we can start with wives and daughters here, because it's a story about people's homes. It's a story about, and Linda Lichter wrote this book here, Simple Social Graces, also called The Benevolence of Manners, and it was about the Victorian women's homes. And it kind of has a viewpoint that is not always, like, sometimes I have to skip some of the things she says because she's so forthright and a little bit harsh on the modern era, on modern women. And but she did write such good things about the Victorian era, and I believe that she was hired by a newspaper to do a series of articles about how much better off we are today than the Victorians women, and she found out the opposite was true. They were a lot more refined and often more protected by the men in their lives, and would like to discuss some of it sometime and read a little bit of it also about women traveling. And so I want to read this to you, and it's on page 50 of this book, and it was about women traveling, and I've been thinking about it a lot. I've quit going so much and quit traveling so much because it takes up so much time, and I don't have anything to show for it except maybe something I bought on the trip, but I want to get my house in order, and so I've stopped traveling, and I think my health is improving because of it. So compared to the Victorians, modern women do not have more freedom, just a different kind of freedom. They have a briefcase full of economic and legal rights, but they have lost the right to be women on Victorian terms and to be admired and rewarded for it. You know, there are even some men today in our age of non-chivalry who despise the weakness of women or the fears of women or women that aren't tough. They despise it, and I'll read more about that in another book here written by a man who talks about how manly men are more protective. And so she says here, they have lost the right to be women on Victorian terms and to be admired or rewarded for it. We should not be fooled into thinking that women can have it all when old choices have been swept away like discontinued merchandise. While none of us would want to trade places with those who couldn't vote or own property, but you see, that wasn't always true, because even in Moses' time, the women that came into the Promised Land wanted a piece of the property, and women did have property in certain societies. It's not all true. We haven't progressed all that much, and every generation has to learn the character to live by, and it doesn't matter how much quote progress we've made in life, and the scriptures prove this out, that no matter what era we're born in, we all have to learn self-motivation, self-control, and to mind our own business and just the normal things, and to work, etc. And let me tell you that I am not going to say women are out working. They are out in jobs. They're out in employment outside of the home, because we work at home. We work, and many times we work much longer than anyone else. And so let me continue. While none of us would want to trade places with those who couldn't vote or own property, gaining the right to crash men's areas like their clubs and their sports is not a very good trade-off for giving up the right to be feminine. Now, unfortunately, the feminists have used that word feminine, and so it can be very confusing. So I am going to call it graciousness, and that is graciousness, or what you might call, you know, someone who moved graciously or fluidly, or someone who isn't blunt or too rough. And I would just call it graciousness. We call it femininity, but it can often be confused with the feminist movement, which is the women's lib movement that got women out of their homes and into the male workforce. And I can't think of a better word for it than graciousness, and it's refinement. We never got to vote on the trashing of our values that not only empowered women but made them the nation's moral arbiters. So being in a family where maybe you are the homemaker, and whether you have children or not, but if you do have children, you have a great deal of influence on them. And if you're a homeschooler, then you're also a teacher, and women are natural teachers. Many women who graduate college want to go into the helping industry and the teaching industry. This can all be fulfilled in the home, because you become natural teachers to your own children. Suzanne Gordon documented the cultural and personal fallout from this loss in her 1991 book, Prisoners of Men's Dreams. These prisoners of male standards were professional women who had learned not to care about co-workers, friends, or family members. These women had adopted the compulsory, detached, and aggressive attitudes of the male-oriented marketplace, which denigrates traditional, nurturing, feminine qualities. Over and over again, Gordon writes, whether they are single or married, with children or without, women say they can't find enough time for their close relationships or even for civility, the small gestures of politeness or neighborliness that have always been nurtured primarily by women. I listened to a woman talking one time on YouTube about how in her lifetime the neighborhood that she lived in had disintegrated after most of the women left their homes to go to work. They were no longer sweeping the front porch or the sidewalk in front of it or the little parking area, and it was just all collected debris. And so when women go to work, the front door usually deteriorates and caves in. The small gestures of politeness or neighborliness that have always been nurtured by women. Now, these successful women lack the time to support and sustain one another emotionally, as well as do the work that kept communities together. Yes, women come to homemaking sites because they need some kind of reinforcement or encouragement. And it used to be that even if we didn't know people, we'd say their light on at night, or we knew those women were home. And there's something comforting about that, even if we didn't ever visit them or they didn't visit us and we weren't associated. We knew they were home. We're all doing the same thing. At the turn of the century, Jane Addams summarized this lost sentiment that inspired her labors, those of many other female reformers. Woman is responsible for the gentler side of life, which softens and blurs some of its harsher conditions. As quoted in Jane Addams, A Centennial Reader by Emily Cooper Johnson. Similarly, in her 1889 memoir, Glimpses of 50 Years, Frances Willard described a cardinal doctrine of my creed when she said, "The woman's touch is to brighten every nook and corner of the earth." Yes, I think that's what started Home Interiors back in the 80s. Home Interiors was kind of a home company that you could have a show in your home and invite people and order things, and they would have a display how you could decorate your walls with sconces and pictures and things to make the home beautiful. And one of their mottos was to make every home beautiful. And so I wanted to read that to you because it's so important. And yes, men can do all this, but women have done it, and it's natural to them if they will let that nature come out. And once they go to work, they can lose that interest and that desire to make the home a better place. And once they go to work, of course, their energy and their thinking is used up at someone else's business and not their own. I wanted to tell you that because there's always been a conflict, and it's coming back. I'm starting to read comments that people write on different articles other people have written about how this is all coming back, this equality thing. And it's so sad because women who have trained their children in maybe homeschool, and then they find out that they've gone the way of the world and they don't believe it anymore, and their grandchildren are suffering for it. And I'm really happy to learn that so many grandmothers are now homeschooling their grandchildren. It is such a great blessing for both. And perhaps we need to re-homeschool our children too. But it's helpful. It's very helpful. And it keeps those children out of the system that may be a failure for them or may not see. In public school, there's one system that fits all, and they claim there's a few choices and there's a few categories, but they've chosen the categories. But when you homeschool, it's tailor-made to the child, to their personality, and you can give them so much more attention and conversation. And even if you have a large family, it works out well because they're not all the same age. And while the world will mock a mother of a large family and say she can't teach all those children, maybe she has 5, 6, or 7 or more, she shouldn't be able to do that, teach them all. They will not say a thing when one teacher has to monitor a classroom of 20 children. So it just makes more sense to let the mothers do it. And now I want to read about wives and daughters because I wanted to have a reading program where we did something that was in Wives and Daughters besides just read it. And like I say, immerse yourself in this and watch. Once you've watched it through, don't say to yourself, "Oh, I've seen that." go and start over and now look for something different. For example, I'll look for, okay, who the main characters are, and then the next time I watch it, I'll find quotes that I want to remember. Another time I might look and see what their activities are. For instance, in one place in here, there's the, and it's described in the book. By the way, my favorite books are from Wordsworth edition. I don't know why I like these so much. And I get them from thrift books, or I get them new on Amazon or somewhere else. And then the next time I watch them, I look for color, because they were really good at, especially also Elizabeth Gaskell wrote North and South, a story of the cotton mills in northern England. And they were very good at taking the descriptions of the colors that they used. It was a kind of a dark green and a burgundy and other colors, and so the whole cast was in these colors. And so I will look for color maybe the next time. I'll look for their interior decor. They will often film inside of a historical building of some kind. I like to look at everything. I will also look for certain activities. There was a picnic in one of these chapters and in here, so that will be after I watch that. That will be when I decide to go and make something like that and do an activity like that. And that would be part of the reading program if I had a school at Ashcombe, and if you were one of my girls, you were one of my students. So I've read to you so far about Molly, and what I loved about this was, and how important stories are to us. You know, I have written little stories because they sometimes explain something better than just mother or grandmother saying, no, you can't do that. And because my mother was so clever, and she didn't want us to torture animals or wreck property or anything, so she'd just tell us a story. After she told us not to do it, she'd tell us a story. And it would make us cry, because she was so, she got so told it so emotionally, and she put so much humanness in it, and we never forgot the lesson. So that's why and Jesus told stories too, so why can't we? And he told stories to help reluctant learners see the point better, the parables and other things. And I love figures of speech, and figures of speech are often used. For instance, water is used in the Bible, the scriptures, in different ways, spiritual ways, and so is dust, and so is clay, and so is pottery, and so many of the words are used in a different way as a figure of speech. But I love what this is called. It's called an ordinary story, an everyday story. Wives and Daughters is what she called it, an everyday story. I love this because she's probably just writing to her own culture at her own time, and she didn't explain everything, because I'm sure she wasn't writing some historical book. It's just an ordinary story, and that's what I like. And Jane Austen was the same way. She wrote stories for her own family to amuse them, and I like doing that. Only mine are just like that long on a page, a little story. And I wanted to read some of this because the introduction tells about Elizabeth Gaskell and why she wrote it, and then chapter 1 starts the dawn of a gala day, where Molly wakes up. She's just a little girl. I'm not sure how old she was at the time, maybe 12. And she was looking forward to going to an event, and she hadn't ever been to one, and the days had gone by quite slowly because she had not, done anything fancy, and she was going to go to the towers where the Cumnor family lived. And so she was excited when she broke. The last time I read to you was about, this was the last, I believe, the last little bit. And it describes, these stories started out describing the town, then it went down to the house, then it went down to describe the room they were in, and then the little girl. And I like that technique. I believe Anne of Green Gables was written that way at first, and some of Jane Austen's were too. It was a trend to write that way. And so now Molly hears the the clock chiming and in the morning, and it says here that the housewives were already up preparing breakfast for the breadwinners of the family. And I thought that was so interesting because the man used to be called the breadwinner. It was said that he brought home the bacon. And the man paid for and built the house, and the woman made a home from it. And every man was determined to get married so that his house would be made into a home. And it was so different. And I lived some of that too in the 1950s, where this was the goal of everyone. And so Molly Gibson saw all this, but all she thought about was, oh, it will be a fine day. I was afraid it never would come. She's looking forward to this tea party that Mrs. Cumnor is putting on for the people of the village. And they were more of a wealthy family, and this is what they did for people. And I was afraid that if it ever did come, it would be a rainy day. 45 years ago, children's pleasures in a country town were very simple, and Molly had lived for 12 long years without the occurrence of any event so great as that which now was impending. Poor child, it is true that she had lost her mother, which was a jar to the whole tenor of her life, but that was hardly an event in the sense referred to, and besides, she'd been too young to be conscious of it at the time. The pleasure she was looking forward to today was her first share in the kind of annual festival in Hollingford. Now, I'm thinking that this book begins with losses. So the first thing you hear about is this loss. She didn't have her mother in her life. It's so sad. Just makes you want to cry. And so the opening scene is her at the event, and she's being called into the party. And so I'll continue here. The little straggling town faded away into country on one side, close to the entrance lodge of a great park, where lived my Lord and Lady Cumnor, the Earl and the Countess, as they were always called by the inhabitants of the town, where a very pretty amount of feudal feeling still lingered, and showed itself in a number of simple ways, droll enough to look back upon, but serious matters of importance at the time. And I'll just read a little bit more about what that was. It was before the passing of the Reform Bill, and if you'll remember in the movie, Mr. Gibson said, give them time and they'll reform us all into kingdom come. And a good deal of liberal talk took place occasionally between 2 or 3 of the more enlightened freeholders living in Hollingford, and there was a great Tory family in the country, who from time to time came forward and contested the election with the rival Whig family of Cumnor. One would have thought that the above-mentioned liberal-talking inhabitants would have, at least, admitted the possibility of their voting for the Healy Harrison, who represented their own opinions, but no such thing. The Earl was the lord of the manor and owner of much of the land on which Hollingford was built. And I think it's interesting how they will take something that's a long description like that and make you see in just the movie, in the play, who the Earl was and why everyone voted for him, even though they complained. It was through the Earl that Hollingford was built. He and his household were fed and doctored, and to a certain measure clothed by the good people of the town. Their fathers, their grandfathers, had always voted for the eldest son of Cumnor Towers, and following in their ancestral tract, every man in the place gave his vote to the liege lord, totally irrespective of the political opinion. Yeah, that's probably what happened today. And I remember back in the day, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but there were certain people that they called yellow dog Democrats. And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, they'll vote for a yellow dog as long as it's a Democrat. And I'm not taking sides because both are very corrupt. This was no unusual instance of the influence of the great landowners over the humbler neighborhoods in those days before railways, as it was well for a place where the powerful family, who thus overshadowed it, were of no respectable a character as the Cumnors. They expected to be submitted to and obeyed. The simple worship of the townspeople was accepted by the Earl and Countess as a right, and they would have stood still in amazement and with a horrid memory of the French, who were the bugbears of their youth, had any inhabitant of Hollingford ventured to set his will or opinions in opposition of those of the Earl. And this is something that when you're very, very young, let's say about 16, and you really think you're smart, you start to say an opinion outright, and they realize you're saying it from your ignorance. It's best to keep quiet. And I see now why the scriptures say that people should be quiet and mind their own business and work with their hands and listen a lot and think a lot and then write a book like she did here. So Lord Cumnor, as they showed in the movie, was not overbearing. He was kind and he cared about other people. And so it said Lord Cumnor had certainly a little time for gossip, which he contrived to combine with the failing of the personal intervention between the old land steward and the tenantry. But then the Countess made up her unapproachable dignity for this weakness of the Earl's. Once a year she was condescending. She and the ladies, her daughters, had set up a school, not a school after the manner of schools nowadays, where far better intellectual teaching is given to the boys and girls of laborers and work people that often falls to the lot of their betters in worldly estate, but a school of the kind that we should call industrial, where girls are taught to sew beautifully, to be capital housemaids and pretty fair cooks, and above all to dress neatly in a kind of charity uniform devised by the ladies of Cumnor Towers. White caps, white tippets, check aprons, blue gowns, and ready curtsies, and please ma'ams. Now, as the Countess was absent from the Towers for a considerable part of the year, she was glad to enlist the sympathy of the Hollingford ladies in this school, with a view to obtaining their aid as visitors during the many months which she and her daughters were away. And the various unoccupied gentlewomen of the town responded to the call of their liege lady and gave her their service as required, and along with it a great deal of whispered and fussy admiration. How good of the Countess, so like the dear Countess, always thinking of others, and so on, while it was always supposed that no strangers had seen Hollingford properly unless they had been taken to the Countess's school and been duly impressed by the neat little pupils and the still neater needlework there were to be inspected. Now, I collected a few quotes from this book, and I wanted to tell you more what it was about before I continue with these little details. And one of them was that it starts out to me with a loss. And Molly tends to, throughout the book or the movie, tends to be losing everything. She loses her father, so to speak, when he decides to remarry. And then she loses her friend Roger when he becomes engaged to her stepsister, Cynthia, and she seems to be always in tears throughout at least half the movie. But there's also something else going on, and that's deception. Mr. Gibson doesn't tell Molly what his plans are, and he springs this engagement on her that he's getting married again, and she didn't know anything about it. And she was 17, and it made me realize in watching that scene how a 17-year-old might benefit a parent if we asked her opinion. What do you think? If you're going to make a major life change, a major life decision, ask your, and depending on whether they have good judgment or not, at least you find out. They might have some insight that you hadn't thought about. And like, we're getting a new kitchen, how would you like it arranged? What would you think would be the ideal arrangement? And get them interested in looking in house plan magazines, or you can buy magazines at the grocery store on kitchens and things like that. Get them interested in how that would work, or just interesting ideas that they might be able to add. Some of them might not have anything, but so there's deception. And later on, Rogers, see Mr. Hamley was like a neighboring gentleman farmer, and he had two sons, Roger and Osborne. Well, Osborne was keeping a secret from everybody, and he tells the secret to Molly that he has a wife and a child, and that his father doesn't know anything about it. And so Molly now has to keep that secret. And then her stepsister arrives on the scene, and she has a secret that she's secretly engaged to Mr. Preston. And so Molly has to keep that secret, and it puts her in jeopardy. I think that would be spiritual jeopardy. And Molly does not always behave wisely, but she's not careless. She's not deliberately careless, but she becomes a cat's paw. You know, remember that story? The monkey wanted some roasted chestnuts, threw some chestnuts in the fire, and after they were done, persuaded the cat to get them out. And the cat burned its paw, and the monkey still got the chestnuts. And so this is really important to know what the plot of the story is. But as time weaves on in this story, there's beautiful costumes, and it's just generally pleasant to watch. And seems a little dark sometimes, the scenes and stuff, but I did capture some, and I took pictures as I was watching it the next time around. And Molly just didn't know how to refuse, you know, and I believe Cynthia had that weakness too. She couldn't refuse Mr. Preston, and she just wanted to please everybody. But Molly had some of that in her too, because she didn't know how to say, no, I can't do that. That would be bad for my reputation. Then I'll have to tell my father. I can't keep a secret from him. And I was thinking what a quandary that puts many of us in. And when I was very young, in order to delay making a no or a rude response to someone, or letting somebody down, or disappointing somebody that wanted me to do something, whether it was to call someone and tell them this or that, or whether it was to sew something for them, or anything, you know, that I would delay it by saying, well, I'll have to talk it over with my husband. But the problem with that is they would wait and then ask me later, well, what did he say? So now we've got this whole another mess involved, in which I have to discuss something with my husband and to see what he thinks, and then he gets blamed if, you know, because I will let him share the burden. And then this other thing is, if you're really young, let's say you are 17 like Molly was, and you say, I can't deliver this letter to Mr. Preston for my stepsister till I ask my father. Well, then the stepsister's waiting and saying, go ahead and ask your father. So now she's got to go to her father and ask him, and if he says no, she's going to be kind of humiliated, and her feelings get hurt, and so it's called, I don't know if you call that triangulation or what, where you just involve so many people. So I figured out that we need to learn to say, and teach our daughters to say, no, I can't, I'm not interested in that. Even if they are interested, you've got to say things in such a way as people won't be able to manipulate your answer. Let's say you meet someone in town, and they just think your kids are wonderful, so they say, can she come and work for me in my shop? And you say, well, we'll have to discuss it. Well, then the lady is so nice, and you don't want to disappoint her. You go home, you have a discussion, and now your husband's involved and everybody else is involved. And whereas if you had just said, there'd be less tension for everybody if you just say, right now my children are home-based, or we are home-based, or we have enough to do at home and my father pays us, or something like that. Because if you say right now, they'll call later and they'll say, I was just wondering if you're still home-based, you know, or I have too much to do at home. Well, then they'll call and say, is there anything I can do to help you? Or do you still have a lot to do at home? Or something like that. It would be better to say no so that no one can get around it. And just say, my daughters are home-based. And we are home-based. But then there's a danger in that too. And the danger in that is to saying, well, I'll send some work home for her to do, and I'll pay her well. So you've just got to really watch about this, and we'll just say we have a business of our own, or our business is at home, and we we're minding our own business at home. Thank you, but and we're fine. We we give this job to someone who doesn't have a father that provides for her. Give this job to someone who doesn't have a husband and is on her own. We're going to leave these jobs open for people who really need them, something like that. And it's hard, isn't it, when there's money involved, and it's sometimes things that present themselves as, quote, opportunities. Remember, when we first started on the web over 20 years ago, there were people commenting on our blogs, our homemakers blogs, saying, you have so much education available for you. Why don't you take advantage of it? I grew up when there was women couldn't go to college and all that. But why don't you take advantage of the opportunities? Let's just rephrase that a little bit. It could be a temptation rather than an opportunity. And not all opportunities are good. And so I wanted to discuss that a little bit because we need to learn how to refuse. And when Molly got herself embroiled, they called it an embroilio, and it's portrayed pretty good in the movie. She was trying to keep a secret. Well, the secret was not kept because she was caught by was it Lord Cumnor, saw her in the woods handing some money and some letters or something, exchange for something with Mr. Preston on behalf of Cynthia, who didn't want to do that, and it was her problem, and she was seen doing this, and she was alone with this man, and she had done no wrong. So her father said to her, what is going on? And she said, I can't tell you because I promised Cynthia that I wouldn't, but I've done nothing wrong. And so I think that we need to learn to say no to people, and even those of you who are vital, it's really easy to get caught up in something and do something, and then you've got to go and backtrack and retract. And I can remember, as many of you can, someone bringing over a big bag of fabric and saying, I want bedspreads for my children, and then I want a matching this and a matching that. Could you do it? And they leave the fabric there, and it's almost like, what? And I can remember taking it all back and saying, I just can't keep up with my housework. I don't have time for it. I've got several things I've got to make for my daughter. Could you get someone else to do it? And I'm so sorry. She was going to pay me. I'm so sorry to disappoint you, but that bag will sit there a long time. And we're still friends. But I'm just, and I don't know how how this happens sometimes. They bring it over and hand it to you and think that you're going to be able to do it. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about some quotes from wives and daughters that I've picked up that I like. And I know you want to talk more about homemaking in the home, but you can also find lots of, there's no excuse to fail in homemaking nowadays. You've got YouTube, there's so many women that are doing this, and you can follow them and you can catch their hints and enjoy what they do. And so I want to read these quotes. Now, I like Lady Cumnor. She's the lady that couldn't say her R's. And she said something that was very significant to me when her daughter, Cynthia, it became known that she'd been engaged to 3 or 4 men and broke it off, and they called her they had a name for her. I'll just read it, the whole thing. And I like Lady Cumnor because she says that she has to tell you she's chastising Claire for being a negligent mother. Lady Cumnor, this is what she says. Now, Claire, when I think a thing, I say it out loud. I don't beat about the bush. You have spoiled that girl of yours until she does not know her own mind. She has behaved abominably to Mr. Pueston. And I saw that in the book and in the movie, that actually, even though he was kind of like a scoundrel type character, he'd been mistreated by Cynthia. She led him on and mistreated him for all the good that he had done her. And it's all due to the faults in her education. And if you recall, Claire had neglected the education of her own daughter and the character training of her own daughter while she taught at a school, taught other children at a school. And it's all due to faults in her education. You have much to answer for. Can you imagine her saying that today to some parent? And of course, we all have to sometimes, because as vital people, we watch for your souls, you young people that are listening to it. And that's why we say things. That's why we say something. Of course, the minute you say something, the person that you're trying to wake up will call you a name and say, my parents are just living in the past. And they just, oh God, I had this saying here. And they will do whatever they can to shut you up. But I just kind of liked her forthrightness. And Mrs. Gibson, she had married the widower, Mr. Gibson, and she had a daughter nearly the same age as Mr. Gibson's daughter, Molly. And you could see that, you could feel the shock, because she didn't realize what Cynthia had been up to. Claire said, Cynthia and Mr. Preston? Because she didn't know. She had no clue. And how many times, see, things haven't changed. I mean, how many times on social media did parents find out that what their sons and daughters were up to, and the relationships they were having, and some of the children even having babies or being engaged, and no one knew about it. All their friends knew about it. The parents were the last to know. Lady Cumnor, Claire, do you mean to tell me you don't know? Your daughter has been engaged to Mr. Pueston for some time, years I believe, and now decided to break it off with him, to be a jilting Jessie, as they called it. That's like dating, where you're just dating kind of as a dating junkie, or a habit, or an addiction to dating, and called her a jilting Jessie. So there were people like that. Lady Harriet Cumnor, Mr. Preston did not want it spoken of. That's the daughter of Mrs. Cumnor. And Lady Cumnor, she has used the Gibson girl as a cat's paw and made her and herself the butt of all the gossip in Hollingford. So of Claire, Mrs. Gibson says, she confronts her daughter Cynthia. Is this all true? Cynthia Kirkpatrick says, Molly knows it all. Mrs. Gibson, yes, I know that, and that she has had to endure gossip and slander for your sake, but more she refused to tell me. Cynthia says, oh, she told you that much, did she? Molly Gibson says, I couldn't help it. So Molly Gibson says, when she's trying to take the next whatever message to Mr. Preston, I do so hate having these underhanded dealings with him. And so I really liked that quote. I collected some of the quotes and I used them in my own life, and I use this one a lot. When I say a thing, I say it out loud. I don't beat about the bush. You've spoiled that child of yours, and they do not know their own mind. And so I wanted to read that too. And then the other thing that I want to read to you today is about how people will say, if you're a homemaker, that what you do is just between God and you. That's all. That's the decision, just between God and you. But look, when it affects other people, it isn't just between God and you. It's like a ripple on the water. You can't just throw a rock in the water and have it just sink to the bottom without affecting the shores around it. And so this man, his name was James William Foley. He was born on 4th February 1874 in St. Louis, Missouri. USA, and he became a newspaperman and a poet, and he was the poet laureate of North Dakota. He wrote the poem Drop a Pebble in the Water for his 2 adolescent sons. James William Foley passed away at 65 years of age in May 1939 in Los Angeles, California. Now, I have seen his poems in church bulletins over the years, and so I want to read it to you. And he was trying to explain to his sons that what you do affects other people. And you might find someone who's taking a substance or who's decided to smoke or drink in the family, and they'll say, well, the Bible doesn't forbid it. It doesn't forbid that I don't do this. But there are other things to consider. Maybe you might not find an exact thou shalt not to every little thing, but you have to think about, is it good use of your time or your health? Is it respectful of your body? We're supposed to present our bodies a living sacrifice. Does it affect other people? It might be harming your baby. It might be harming your child. It might be, years ago they discovered the effect of secondhand smoke, and it's now all over America. You can hardly smell anybody smoking anymore. We used to, the restaurants would be clouded with it, the airplanes, the trains, everything, and now everything is clear because of the secondhand smoke law, and you can't even smoke on the sidewalks here, or the footpaths is what they call it. You just can't smoke in public. And so drop a pebble in the water. I want to read this to you, and you think about the influence, and this is about influence, how we never really just live unto ourselves. And that's one of the reasons that we are homemakers. We want to be homemakers, is it has a good influence. And we hope to influence future generations. And like Emily Barnes said in many of her books, we aren't just raising one generation. We have an influence on future generations. We didn't just raise our daughters to be homemakers just for them to turn against it or make up their own mind later on. But and there are people that will say that you have to make your own mistakes. And I've thought about that a lot. Well, just let me make my own mistakes. Just let me, fall down. I'll do right. But if it affects other people, if it's influencing other people, if it's hurting other people, and if you're going to tell a mother, just be quiet and let me make my own mistakes, you might as well tell every preacher to shut his mouth too. Can you imagine telling a preacher after you've left and he's read some warning out of James or something else? Well, just let me make my own mistakes, preacher. Well, that would put the preachers completely out of business, wouldn't it? Well, maybe some of them have figured out how to work around that, but might as well tell Jesus and the Apostle Paul, just let me make my own mistakes, because they're full of warnings. And so one of the reasons that we raise our children, and homeschooled or not, but especially homeschooled, is to spare you the heartache of a broken home and a broken life and a ruined health and of dashed opportunities and loss of your soul. We watch for your souls. So yeah, and just let me live my own life too. I appreciate my friends. I appreciate the things that they tell me. And as you get more vital, it's kind of sad because you don't have anybody older bossing you around, telling and caring about what you do. You don't have that. So unless you get really bossy kids. Drop a pebble in the water. Just a splash and it is gone. But there's 100 ripples circling on and on and on. Spreading from the center, flowing on out to the sea. And there is no way of telling where the end is going to be. Drop a pebble in the water. In a minute you forget. But there's little waves a-flowing and there's ripples circling yet. And those little waves a-flowing to the great big wave have grown. You've disturbed a mighty river just by dropping in a stone. Drop an unkind word or careless, in a moment it is gone. But there's 100 ripples circling on and on and on. They keep spreading from the center as they go. And there is no way to stop them once you've started them to flow. Drop an unkind word or careless, in a minute you forget, but there's little waves a flowing, and there's ripples circling yet. And perhaps in some sad heart a mighty wave of tears you've stirred, and disturbed a life that's happy ere you dropped that unkind word. Drop a word of cheer and kindness, just a flash and it is gone, but there's 100 ripples circling on and on and on, bearing hope and joy and comfort on each splashing, dashing wave, till you wouldn't believe the volume of the one kind word you gave. Drop a word of cheer and kindness, in a minute you forget, but there's gladness still a-swelling, and there's joy a-circling yet. And you've rolled a wave of comfort, whose sweet music can be heard over miles and miles of water, just by dropping one kind word. So we don't really ever live unto ourselves and make our own mistakes, because our mistakes and the errors that we make that could have been prevented had we listened to someone's caution can affect, ruin, and hurt other people around us. And many of you who are vital have experienced it and know it, and that is why you take it upon yourself to caution your children. Now, I brought a couple of books here to read to you, and I wanted to make sure that I come more often, but it has been so busy here. And one of them is this question about dressing more graciously. I want to say gracious now because it's too confusing to talk about feminism, because what it was what Taylor Caldwell called the liberation ladies. And it was the difference between dressing girlish and womanly and dressing masculinely, and it was in this book, The Christian Charm Course. It's perhaps unfortunate that she named it the Charm Course, because of course Christians don't like to use that word, because you know, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, like one of the versions says of the Bible. But what it really meant is graciousness, and throughout this is nothing but good Christian principles. But one of the pages on dressing more girlish and showing the difference and the contrast of dressing more in a masculine way, and encouraging young ladies to dress more like young women rather than young men. And today we have what do they call it? It's like the same. You know, everybody dresses the same, and at a distance you cannot tell. And here's was a page that was really nice, that showed different things to wear to different places. And that's one of the things I liked about this book. And you know, you could write your own and dressing appropriately for the occasion. And one was formal, informal, and casual. And this was written back in the 1960s, but it's reprinted. And I would suggest, if you get one for yourself, take yourself through this course. You know what? You might have felt that you missed out on a lot of things and wish there were things taught to you that you're now finding out. You can order this and take yourself through the course, and get the teacher's manual too, and take yourself through the course. And it just gives you such a greater understanding of yourself as a woman and her role. I also have a couple of more things to talk to you about. And one of them is, you know, I talked to you about bulletins, church bulletins. We're still doing it the old-fashioned way. Mr. S likes to spend all day Saturday typing a bulletin up for everybody, and they go in and take a piece of paper. So I want to read a little poem that I had on here, and this goes along with this dropping a pebble in the water and the influence. And it was called, Are Young People Really to Blame? You know, there's always the complaining about what people are into, and they have vices, and they get caught up in worldly things. But listen to this. This is such a good poem, and it's a really old one too. Do you remember in the old days, you who are vital, how we used to clip these and clip things out of old bulletins, stick them in one of those albums, and it was just like an activity. We wanted to save all this. We read in the paper, we hear on the air of killing and stealing and crime everywhere. We sigh and we say as we notice the trend, this young generation, where will it end? But can we be sure it's their fault alone? Too much money to spend, too much idle time. Too many movies of passion and crime. Too many books not fit to be read. Too much evil in what they hear said. Too many kids encouraged to roam. Too many parents who don't stay at home. Youth don't make the movies. They don't write the books that paint the pictures of gangsters and crooks. They don't make the liquor. They don't run the bars. And they don't make the cars. They don't make the drugs that addle the brain. It's all done by older folks greedy for gain. In how many cases we find that is true. The label delinquency fits older folks too. And yes, that is a good point. You need to go to the source of everything and before you start blaming. However, we know there's nothing new under the sun, and in this world, God has given us a way to be self-controlled so that we're not controlled by other things. And this is how it's done. And one of the things that I have come across is this idea that anxiety seems to be the illness of the era. Everybody has so much anxiousness, and that the scriptures say, do not be anxious for anything, and how hard it is to turn it off once that adrenaline starts coming in and all the stress hormone producing the cortisol, and then you start getting sick and everything, how hard that is to put a stop to it. But right after it says, and it's from Philippians chapter 4, that whole chapter is very interesting. I often had ignored everything else and just loved this, whatever's true, whatever's honorable, whatever's just, verse 8, Philippians 4:8, and my children memorized. We thought it was so beautiful to think on loveliness, but the rest of it is absolutely riveting. And before it says that, it says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. So before I stop today, I want to say that if anxiety is so prevalent in our lives, perhaps we should step up on our thanksgiving, step on our appreciation. Even if all you do all day long is appreciate and thank God and thank others, it might have a big effect on the anxiety level. Let's just experiment and see, shall we? We have nothing to lose, and except ill health, we can lose that. But it promises after this that if you will increase your thanksgiving and let your requests be made known to God, the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Some of these things we need to dwell on a whole lot more, maybe just 3 little words or 4 little words, and just really meditate on that. And so, ladies, I'd like to keep talking and talking and talking. I have to protect my voice, and I would like to come back more often. Please pray that I will take time out to do that. I've decided that probably my house will never be clean enough to justify coming here, but I am also broadcasting to my young descendants and my older descendants too. All of my children are now approaching the age of 50, and many of you vital people are having that experience too. But we still have a lot to give, and we don't want to put on the shelf. And so, ladies, I hope that this has helped in some way, and please stay close to Christ. Remember to pray for all your people. There's probably no one else that's praying for them, for your husband, for your children, for your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. Remember to pray for them, each one of them. Spend a lot of time doing that. We hear so much of world events, and our heart just starts racing, and we want to pray for this country and that country and all these politicians and everything. Well, we're supposed to pray for them so that we can live a peaceful life. So do offer prayers for our country leaders, but your family is more important. They're what's going to really make the country by the way they live. And so we pray for them. Also, take care of your appearance. That's really important because it gives you dignity and confidence. And also, I think it's really important to have a routine of your home so you can get at least one thing done a day, even if it's just keep a clean kitchen or keep a clean bathroom. And I have spent a little time today. I walked around London with Lucy Wyndham Reed, and she's the exercise lady that, let me see if I can find her. It's a 15-mile, and I have been with her to, it's 15-minute walk and tone in London. And I'll give you the link on that, because that's all I did. Is I did it in the house, and then once I did it outside. And she's been to Venice too, and she's walked around and shown you how to do exercises while you're walking. Now I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if she really. Yeah, she was really in London, and so I went to London with her, and I didn't have to worry about where to find something to drink or where to find a bathroom, and I just walked around here and started to appreciate my own place, and felt like that this was just as much of a vacation as going there. And so I wanted to give that to you, because it does change the way your brain functions, and it does change your optimism and your faith. A lot of times when you have exercise, it changes your ability to think on the bright side and the positive side. So I hope you'll go and do that, and make sure that you get your list ready, and put your family first before you get too involved in other things. And so God bless you. I love you. Thank you for all the encouragement that you give me and all that you do for me. I do have mail that I need to send out. I do need to, answer some of your letters, your emails, and I'm sorry I haven't been very busy here. I have often have someone here staying with me, and so I've just decided I'm just going to have to pretend no one's here if I'm going to be able to come here, and just ignore it all and talk to you. And I hope you'll be refreshed by it, and I really appreciate your comments. They give me lots of ideas for content and things I hadn't thought of before. So I will see you next time. Bye.